morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today we need to take a look at a couple of those new cards from Black Bolt and White Flare. And a new Stage 1 line. Well, a new version of a Stage 1 line we've obviously had for a while. And I suppose if you want to be pedantic, they are from White Flare. They're not actually from Black Bolt. These are different. Split set and all that. And if you're the kind of person that likes playing item cards, oh boy howdy, have I got some bad news for you. Starting off with Frillish here, we've got ourselves an 80 HP basic, which low-key, remember, 80 HP basics are really annoying, because what you really want to do with basics nowadays is search them out with Buddy Buddy Poffin. So although that extra 10 HP is nice in terms of survivability, and it is, the fact that you cannot search it out with Buddy Buddy Poffin is actually super duper annoying. But the attack is only going to be annoying for your opponent. What we've got here is single energy, 20 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, they cannot play item cards from their hands. Single energy, 20 damage, item lock. And the real key point here is it's single energy on a basic Pokemon. That is what is so important here. And this is not very far away from Seismitoad. Seismitoad was single energy 30 and turning off item cards on a basic, but that was 2 colorless energy. This was 1 single energy, and it is a colored energy, I suppose, but play a psychic deck, you'll be fine. Point I'm making here is that although it's not quite Seismitoad, it really is not very far away. And Seismitoad was awesome. And one of the cool, well, it was a really good card. I didn't like it personally, but it was a very, very, very powerful card. And one of the things to bear in mind is this is an attack, right? So you use this attack, and it doesn't matter what your opponent does on their next turn, they're not using item cards. If your active switches, if their active switches, no way around this. Once you've used this attack, your opponent is locked out of item cards for the turn. This is a very, very, very big deal. A very big deal. Love it. Absolutely love it. It's going to get super annoying super quickly. But it's also only got 80 HP. It's not exactly like it's going to stay around for ages. What we really need is a way to go ahead and bump up that amount of HP while also retaining the item lock. Well, have I got wonderful news for you. Jellicent EX. And what we've got here is, if this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, your opponent cannot play item cards from their hand, and they cannot play Pokemon tools from their hand. Now, one thing that's very, very important to note here is that when we went to Scarlet and Violet, we split up tools and item cards. So whereas tools used to be a subset of items, tools are now their own thing. So when you're using Frillish's attack, you're locking your opponent out of item cards, but they are free, if they so wish, to go ahead and attach tools from their hand. With Jellicent here, yeah, they can't do either. So essentially, in theory, you go second, use Frillish's attack to stop your opponent being able to play item cards, and then you evolve up into Jellicent, at which point not only are they locked out of item cards, but they're also locked out of tool cards. You add it up together, and we've got proper item lock. Now, here's the thing about item lock. Generally speaking, item lock fails for one of 2 reasons. Now, we've had some good item lock in the past. We've also had a lot of failed item lock. Something like Seismitoad, yes, but for every Seismitoad, there's like an Omastar who is just too awkward to get into play. So generally speaking, either it fails for a reason like Omastar, it's just too awkward to get into play, it's not consistent enough, I'm sorry, or it fails for a reason like Bayonet, which to be fair, Bayonet has still been decent and playable. Bayonet is cool, but 30 damage just isn't very much. And that is a bit of a problem. Those are generally the 2 reasons why we see item lock on new Pokemon failing. Either you don't do enough damage, so sure you're item locking your opponent, but actually you're not doing much damage. You're giving them plenty of time to get around it and then get a new Pokemon up to KO you. Or it's just super awkward. Like the Omastar, firstly, it's a stage 2 fossil, which is super annoying to get into play. And secondly, you could only, this only worked if you had fewer Pokemon in play than your opponent. Not the same number or fewer than your opponent. So there'd be plenty of times where you were just like, well, even if I've got my stage 2 Omastar into play and it still's not working. And don't get me wrong, I saw some decks of Omastar doing okay, and we've seen that Bayonet has been very good at times. We've seen Bayonet Gardevoir decks doing alright at times, but neither of those really set the metagame on fire. And the reason was that Omastar was too annoying to actually get the item lock, and Bayonet didn't do enough damage. Well, in theory, Jellicent gets around both of these. Because not only is it just a stage 1 Pokemon you have to have active, but you've also got a basic Pokemon with an attack. So if you go first, your opponent gets 1 turn, and they will be able to attack and use supports and all of that, and then they're item locked. If you go second, your opponent has 1 turn without supporters or attacks, but they can still use items. And then you attack with Frillish, then you evolve up, and your opponent has no items for the game. Oh. That seems to work quite nicely now, doesn't it? What about the other issue? What about the damage? Well, 2 energy, 80 damage, but if you've got 2 extra energy attached to this, in addition to the amount of energy you need to actually pay for it, then you do an extra 80 damage. 2 energy 80 on an item locking Pokemon is fine. It's not good. But again, the theory here is you're kind of locking your opponent out the game, so you just need a decent attack, and 80 damage will, it'll 3 or 4 hit KO most things in the game. It's not ideal, but it's not terrible. But if you get extra energy on there, well, hang on a second. You can be doing 160 while item locking. That has potential. And this is where we need to really look at the wording of this, because the wording becomes very, very, very important. The wording here says, if you have 2 extra energy, it does 80 more damage. Yeah, ignition energy will work here. This will work with ignition energy. You put 1 psychic on there, and then you pop an ignition energy on there, and now all of a sudden, things are getting way, way more fun. Remember, ignition energy falls off at the end of your turn, but it's a colorless energy. Or if it's attached to an evolution Pokemon, it is free colourless energy. Doesn't need you to be behind on prizes or any of that malarkey. So you can just turn 1, energy. Turn 2, ignition energy, evolve 160. Turn 3, ignition energy, 160. Now, you will run out of ignition energy, yeah? You've only got 4 in your deck maximum, and, saying you're just going to have it every turn is making a big assumption that you will be able to find it every turn. I grant ya. But this could potentially be item lock doing 160 damage. That's really good. Like I've said, the biggest problem with item lock generally is either, oh, it's too annoying to get into play, or, oh, that's not quite enough damage, and when you're not doing enough damage, you're giving your opponent plenty of time to essentially get out of the item lock. The fact that we've got potential answers to both of these issues straight off the bat says very, very positive things for the potential of this card moving forward. Now, is it perfect? Oh my no! For instance, it only works when you're active. So your opponent can use Gusting to get around this. They make you switch your active Pokemon, they drag up a Pokemon which doesn't have this ability, and all of a sudden it's turned off. Now, the good news is that essentially, the ways to gust most of the time, I'm not saying all the time, I'm saying most of the time, you've either got supporter cards, well sure, they can play boss's orders, or another supporter that does it, but then they've got items, but they've already used their supporter for the turn, so they don't have full use of resources. Or, you're talking item cards like Pokemon Catcher, Prime Catcher, things of that nature, Counter Catcher, but of course, they're item cards. You can't use item cards when there's an active Jellicent EX. So yes, your opponent can just grab something else into the active, but it is not as easy as you would sometimes think. Also, you can just set up a board state of like 2 or 3 Jellicent and then just sit there. And then just be like, mate, you can't switch my active for a non-Jellicent, all I have is Jellicent. Is this going to work perfectly? I don't know. We need to see the rest of the set, first of all. We need to figure out what the meta is going to look like, and then we need to actually get down and test. Is there a lot of potential for this? Oh my goodness, yes. Because think about something like Badoo, right? Basic Pokemon, no energy, 10 damage plus item lock, and that sees a lot of play. The thing is, Badoo is incredibly weak. So basically, Badoo comes out, and you just KO it. Sorted. Done. Gone. Now it's slowed you down, it's made you waste a couple of turns, and sometimes it has locked you out the game, because you just haven't been able to get set up. But here, instead of the pitiful 30 HP on Badoo, you've got 80 HP on Frillish, and then you got up to 270 HP on Jellicent, and you're hitting a decent amount of damage. This is not the same as something like Badoo, which essentially gives you a few turns of item lock, but then can just be KO'd, and then it's a little bit awkward. This is proper, genuine, true item lock, game-long item lock, and I'm not saying it's going to transform the metagame, but I am saying, like, you get this rolling, and your opponent can't play Buddy Buddy Poffin, and they can't play things like Ultra Ball. And then they can't use their ace spec in a lot of games. They can't use something like Sparkling Crystal to try and reduce the attack cost of their Terra Pokemon and so on and so forth. I'm not going to sit here and just list out ace specs and other item cards and tool cards because, well, we could be here a while, honestly. But I'm hoping you get the point. Taking items and tools completely off the table, there are going to be so many games where you play this, your opponent just never draws anything good because you're item locking them and then you win the game. And there are some games where it is going to be as simple as that. Until I'm proved otherwise, I'm giving this 5 Wassies. The fact that you actually do a decent amount of damage, the fact that the basic can start the item lock before the stage 1 finishes it off, yeah, there is so much potential here. There's a lot of people, and I count myself among them, who are gonna hate this. But I want to know what you think. So let me know in the comment section, would you us? Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @TheWasi. That's where we talk about Pokemon and a whole bunch of other card games. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all kinds of fun things. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.